Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Total Jobs webinar. First of all, apologies for earlier. We had some technical issues with the audio, but we've managed to get started again. And yeah, thank you for your patience. I put a brand new shirt on this morning, so I'm glad that we managed to get everything working again, and we'll crack on with the webinar. I'm aiming to make up a little bit of time, and we're hoping to have a finish at 10:02. So thank you again for your patience. So today's webinar is titled Unlocking New Talent Pools and Tapping into the Mindset of Career Changes. Just before I start the presentation, I just want to go through a very quick bit of housekeeping. We are recording this webinar, and we will share the recording and the slides with you afterwards. So don't worry about the stress of taking notes, just sit back and listen to the presentation and the panel discussion. If you've got any questions, we have already had some questions, so thanks for those who've sent this to us. Drop them in the chat box and we'll come to these at the end. But today I'm going to be sharing some of our latest Total Jobs research into career changes and looking into the transferable skills that support your recruitment strategy. So to start with, I'm going to be looking at the state of play in the UK economy, which obviously has changed dramatically in the last 3 months. I'm also going to look at the changing mindsets of employers, and then also look at how we look at attracting candidates from different sectors. And then I'm delighted to say we are joined by Janine Chidlow from AMS and also from Jon Hull from Nationwide Build Society. So they're going to be joining me on a panel. We can have some great discussion later. And you will have an opportunity to ask them questions through the chat function. So let's move on with the state of play. So I just want to give you a quick overview of the market that we currently find ourselves in. So the latest business survey from the ONS shows that 79% of businesses are in operation, with a further 9.3 having either resumed trading in recent weeks or are intending to restart in the next 2 weeks. The Bank of England has now predicted a V-shaped recovery, but it does look, and obviously there was an announcement this morning in terms of unemployment is still a concern over the coming months. And obviously with the figures that were released this morning really shows that there is going to be a change in the employment market. Many of you, like myself, would have tuned in to the Chancellor of the Exchequer's summer statement on the 8th of July. There was a big focus on jobs, supporting businesses in hiring and retaining staff by improving cash flow, as well as protecting people's jobs, which was great, investing in the sectors which have suffered the most during the pandemic. And obviously all this is in a bid to reduce the risk surrounding redundancy and unemployment. So at Total Jobs, we're in a great position because of all the data that we have across our jobs boards, we can actually monitor and identify trends. And what we saw job postings have continued to rise in June. Vacancies were up 30% month on month. We saw sales and construction being the fastest growing sectors in terms of job vacancies that were posted in that period compared to the 4 weeks prior. From the 15th of June, we saw that non-essential retailers opened their doors again, a move that was reflected in the modest upward trend in job adverts on Total Job. And similarly, what we saw is hospitality roles have been increasing throughout the last week, which obviously followed on from the announcement that the pubs and restaurants would open from the 4th of July. And as of the 10th of July, UK holidaymakers, they won't need to quarantine if travelling to countries considered to be at reduced risk of coronavirus, which obviously is positive for the travel industry. So these changes are reflected in what we're seeing on our Total Jobs platforms, with the largest volume that we saw posted was in IT roles, which was 20,000. In logistics was 12,000. Social care, there was an increase of 9,000. And then in retail, travel and hospitality, they're all showing very positive growth month on month increases at 51, 47 and 23% respectively. We've also seen the skilled trades seeing a strong week-on-week growth at 57%. So unsurprisingly, we are seeing applications per vacancy across all sectors, reflecting continued rise in candidate activity across our Total Jobs site. I just want to spend a little bit of time just looking at the fastest growing sectors, and I think this links in very nicely to looking at skills transferring from sector to sector. So what we saw is candidate search volume on Total Jobs. It's now ahead of this time last year with June, showing a rise of 4 million. I mean, let me just repeat that figure: 4 million. That's a huge rise that we've seen in candidate search activity compared to the previous May. Candidate searches rose by 30% overall compared to the previous month. So we've seen a demand in roles for social care across the lockdown period for obvious reasons. We've also, in comparison, seen sectors such as retail, again for obvious reasons, see a dip corresponding to those sectors that were put on hold, while we saw a strong rise in searches echoing the opening of non-essential retail stores. And sales have also seen a sharp rise in June compared to May. And again, this is likely the cause of multiple sectors gradually reopening as these roles are being sought after again. This slide here is actually one of my favourite slides, because I think what it really shows is how creative a lot of organisations and industries have been. So during the pandemic, many people's roles within their organisations have been transformed. For example, employees in retail businesses, looking at fashion, sports retail and New Balance, they turned their staff to producing surgical masks and gowns. We saw Tesla, Ford, and others who shifted production to ventilators using car parts that were no longer of use due to a lack of consumer demand. And we even saw that the Royal Mint started creating plastic visors. Other sectors created what Harvard Review calls cross-industry talent exchanges, which saw employees displaced during the crisis temporarily moving to sectors that didn't have the people to meet the surge in demand. And this approach helps staff develop new skill sets. It expands their networks and avoids redundancies. There is a really good example actually of this, which actually comes from China, which basically shows that businesses established an employee sharing plan, which I think is a great idea. What it did is it gave staff without work the opportunity to temporarily move to supermarkets or food delivery and then come back to their role in more improved times. This is all great. We've all looked at some examples and certain things that organisations can do, but actually it's about the mindset that needs to change. And in the past there has been quite a lot of stigma around the career changer, or some people refer to it as the job hopper. Previous experience within the industry looking to hire was seen as a necessity, but as businesses and workers have shifted their focus and moved where their skills are most needed, this is inspiring others and challenging this stigma for the better. So there's more chance to link outside the box, to use that phrase, for both workers and employees. In fact, our Total Jobs research has shown that 2/3 of workers, that's a huge amount, 64%, say that examples of diversifying businesses like the ones I just mentioned have made them more inclined to consider changing industries, as it highlights the opportunity to shift and to adapt. And as a result of the adaptability, businesses have shown during the crisis, 40% of people believe that employers will now be more open to them looking to change industries, which is great news. With this, 1 in 5 people told us that they have explicitly said that hearing about people changing industries has highlighted that it's more of a possibility within their own career too than they may have previously considered. So what we also found is that 2 in 3 people are re-evaluating their career as a direct result of COVID-19. And recent developments have meant that 1 in 5 UK workers have realised that their current role isn't for them. And I suppose that a lot of people have been on furlough, they've had more time at home, they've had more time to think. I think that's one of the reasons why people are now saying, okay, they've had time to reevaluate where they are and potentially move on. And 7 in 10 people say they're more likely to consider a career change due to COVID-19. So a further 1 in 5 are using this time to plan, to make sure they've got everything ready, they know what they're doing, they have a strategy to find a new career. Some are making specific plans when it comes to making the switch. 1 in 4, so that's 23% of the workers expect to change industries within the next year. Half of workers are interested in changing in the next 2 years. And here's the important point, in my view. 43% of people want to make a move as soon as possible. So really, what that is telling us as employers, as organisations looking to hire staff, we need to ensure that we're making the most out of these shifting mindsets and plans, which perhaps didn't happen 2 or 3 months ago, and we need to all make sure when we're recruiting staff that we're positioning ourselves in the right way for career changes. So I suppose just looking at that shift, what we need to make sure that we're doing is that we're understanding what is driving that shift. And I think that's really key, to be able to create strategies and messages that resonate with potential candidates. And from our research, what we found is that workers who are considering a career change are looking to learn new skills. They want better life balance. They want training and development opportunities, job security, and if relevant to the role, an ability to working from home, which is an interesting point, which I'll come onto in a minute. So focusing your employer brand and your communications around these factors means that you can really connect with talent outside your existing industry. And of course, first, you need to know where to look. So this is looking at the different transferable skills that you can move across sector. And at Totaljobs, what we're calling this, we've created a report which we're calling the transfer market. And what we did is we analysed 273,000 job advertisements and over 1 million skills. And through this, we established the most sought after skills across all of the industries. So the skills employers are most often including in job adverts are the ones you see on the screen. Plus, and just to add on to that, I mean, some of those you might think are fairly obvious, but just to add on to that is I suppose interpersonal skills that are highly transferable: time management, numeracy, patience, and administration. So through looking at the skills across the different sectors, we also established a compatibility scores for different types of key UK industries. And the analysis identified the top skills associated with each industry using insight from the skills listed in the real job descriptions, and then calculated the compatibility by comparing the number of overlapping key skills between 2 industries. So let's just take an example. So if I may, if I just take construction as an example, businesses hiring in this sector can target people with relevant transferable skills from design, administration, engineering, business management, and even banking and finance. And some of these have a clear link, and construction firms might well hire from these already, but it might be that the relevance of some of the others isn't so immediately clear. So at Totaljobs, we have almost 40 transferable skill sector guides that you can download. When we finish this webinar, we will be sending you the recording, but we'll also send you a link to those. And they're really useful in identifying different transferable skills connected to different individual sectors. So we now know that people have already tried to find work elsewhere. Unfortunately, some people had to out of necessity rather than aspirational goal due to the impact of COVID-19. Of those who found work in a different industry after they were displaced by the pandemic, over half say that this career change was welcome, while 52% hope to stay in the new industry, which is a really interesting statistic. While this presents a challenge for employers looking to regain and retain staff, this talent, as restrictions ease, for those actively recruiting, there has been and continues to be an opportunity to scale up talent pools. And 2 in 3 believe that they had previously developed, the skills that they previously developed were of use in their new industry. And the same amount believe that they have a greater understanding of how valuable their skill set is after making the switch. It's also great to see, I'm really pleased to see this, that 2 in 3 received training when they joined a new industry. Obviously that gives them the best chance of success in their new role. With this, 55% say that they were surprised about how smooth the transition was, which again goes back to the value of transferable skills during the times where businesses and workers were forced to adapt. And this shows that this method works, and it reminds us that hiring for set knowledge or experience alone isn't the solution. You can cast your net wider and see the benefits. So a really good example of this is actually from our sister company, caterer.com, and they have a redeployment hub. And so far, this redeployment hub has hosted 33,000 non-hospitality roles. It's generated nearly 44,000 job applications, and it's connected hospitality staff with roles into other sector to fill gaps before the restaurants and bars opened. Applications to the redeployment hub have come from all over the UK. Jobs on the hub are selected based on their likely match to transferable hospitality skills, such as attention to detail and flexibility. And what we've seen is that the main sectors of where the transfer has been during this time has been sectors such as social care, sales, retail, and cleaning. And amongst the most popular out of all of those have been roles in logistics and customer service. And we have all seen companies that have benefited from this. And for example, just give you examples, Amazon, Lidl, Superdrug, Care UK, they've all benefited from these skills of people transferring from the hospitality sector during the lockdown period. So how do you navigate through this? It's not just about hiring, where you can utilize the transfer market. It's about how you navigate out of the crisis. And through the recovery period, it means that you need to critically look at the way your business typically does things to see where the opportunities lie for existing staff. And this means having a strong idea of team structures, roles, responsibilities. What we saw before COVID-19 is that us as a team at Totaljobs, we spoke a lot about skill shortages, something that the vast majority of businesses have experienced at various senior levels. And this issue could be worsened by the pandemic, or it might be that the gaps start appearing in new areas. So it's really important as employers that we keep our eye on the ball in terms of how roles have changed and how they might change again, because things are moving very, very fast, and how we really need to look at how they might change over the coming months and years. And it means that we need to support staff through this, reskill or upskill as required and as necessary. So what is this going to look like in practice? So we've seen some examples here. During the pandemic, businesses including Alliance Global Investors and Cisco, they set up internal project marketplaces that distilled work into tasks and projects that were then matched with people across the businesses who had the relevant skills. So what they found is that within those marketplaces, it enabled people within departments who had a lack of work to find opportunities in their existing businesses using the transfer skills in business areas that could make more of an impact at that particular time. So there's no reason why this approach can't be used in the future too, irrespective of whether there's a pandemic. It doesn't have to be a response to a crisis. And I think that's a really important lesson and something that we've learned, if you like, a positive that we can take from this period. So this example, I suppose what that does, it highlights the adaptability needs to continue to be the most valuable traits within your workforce for the future. And with this, prioritising transferable skills over specialist skills or knowledge will be valuable and relevant for many roles. And while technical or specific knowledge can be taught, it's adaptability, resilience, flexibility that has seen workers navigate the challenging situation of the last 3 months. And we cannot underestimate the value of that. According to the Centre of Creative Leadership, there's 3 types of flexibility that help people adapt and change. And this is a framework that we could all use when assessing adaptability. So just to give you a very brief outline of this, in a nutshell, you've got cognitive. How does someone approach the thinking about strategies and frameworks? Also emotional, which is a key part of it. How does someone varies their approach depending on the situation or other people involved? I'd probably put myself on the emotional side. And dispositional, remaining optimistic, realistic when it comes to embracing change and running with that. So there are new ways of doing things, which obviously comes with lots of questioning. It also comes to trust between teams, managers, employers, so you know what your teams are strong enough to navigate these shifts. Findings from a separate research piece that we did back in April basically saw how impactful the actions of businesses have been during the COVID-19 pandemic. Over a third of workers feel more positive about their employer as a result of their response to COVID-19, while 1 in 4 feel more loyal to their company of how they've responded to it. Many staff feel closer together, or they have a greater sense of community within their business following the pandemic. And as employers, we need to make sure that we don't let this slip as we turn our focus into getting things back up and running. Our quick actions during this recovery period can't be detrimental to the trust we built up, which is why we all need to take this time to reassess the structure, the approach, and strive to be transparent and honest with our teams as we go. So with all this, what could that attraction and brand piece actually look like? So we've come to the end of the presentation before we go on to the panel discussion, but I just want to take a just a few minutes just to have a look at a couple of quick tips from a job ad perspective, and how we talk about wider brand strategies as part of our branding and recruitment strategy. So tapping into the mindsets of people it's about not thinking of them only in candidate terms. If you're actively looking for people from outside of your industry, make it explicit in your advertising and in your targeted emails. If you offer flexibility, or if you're looking at this, be clear on what that means for staff, and position it as a way of working, not as a work perk or benefit. And I think that's a really interesting point, because following the pandemic, candidates now, they're not thinking of flexibility in the way they did before, because flexibility now is meaning a different thing. And it's something that many people, no matter what their career stage is, or whether they've got children, what stage of life they're in, or their responsibilities, people are all looking for those moving forward. It's not just the fact that someone works from home because they have children at home. It's for people who don't have children. So it's really important to get these right, especially when we're hiring from outside our industry, where the brand could be less well known or less understood. So it's important that we really can make an impact and grab that attention of career changers. So just to touch on the language, I know this sounds obvious, but it's a really important point. It's not just about what to include when promoting roles, it's about how you talk about your offering. If you're looking at how to reach out to people outside your existing industry, it's not just speaking to those in terms of needs of development, job security and work-life balance that I've mentioned. It's other subtleties that can really make a difference and ensure that you're not unwittingly reducing your talent pool, particularly in industries that might have historic overrepresentation over gender, for example. What has come out actually in the research is that people are less likely to apply for jobs that include historically gendered language. Sectors including science, consulting, sales, advertising, These are all industries which are historically male dominated, whereas in social care, animal care, public sector administration, typically they see a higher percentage of women. So often industries that have over-representation of a certain gender also use gender biased language that reflects this in job adverts, which is unconsciously kind of puts others off. So if you are, say, a consulting business that has a high percentage of male staff and you're looking to hire talent from outside your industry, you can use other tools that are on the market. In particular, just if I can use this as a plug for one of our own tools, we have a gender bias coder, which is part of the package, and what it does is it checks the language and makes sure that you're not unintentionally discouraging more women from applying for a particular role. So I've rushed through that, but thank you. Sorry, just to make up a little bit of time, but thank you so much for your patience on the presentation. We're now moving forward to our really interesting panel, which I'm just going to check my technology, and I should be able to bring them in. So Janine and John, if you could unmute yourselves, and there we are.
Good morning.
Hi, Will.
Brilliant. Good morning. Good morning, Janine, and good morning, John. Thank you very much for, well, first of all, for joining us, but also for your patience. So great to have you here. So for our audience, could we just start, Janine, could we just start with you and just give our audience a quick introduction?
No problem. Thanks, Will. So Janine Chidlow. I'm a sector managing director at Alexander Mann Solutions, particularly looking after the financial services sector. And we hire close to 200,000 permanent people globally for our clients, across 180 clients. So some good reference points for today's dialogue. Now, I've been in the world of recruitment since '91, so I'll probably bring out some war stories and some examples from my previous history as well.
Great.
Okay, over to you, John.
Thanks, Janine. So yes, I'm Jon Hull. I lead the resourcing delivery efforts at Nationwide, which covers, I guess, all permanent hiring, including tech, emerging talent, volume, and traditional head office roles. I've been in the industry slightly less time than Janine, thankfully, but since about '95, and worked across many industry sectors. So, I mean, Will's point earlier about changing sectors, I always see it as you're the skill first and the sector second, right? So I've worked across investment banking, construction, facilities management, and distribution, and then obviously now retail banking. We hire, or did last year, we hired about 3,000 permanent hires across Nationwide, which is across the whole of the UK. And I've had a massive focus on technical talent, and we do have our own homegrown program, which is a career change program to give people tech skills, and then we deploy them into the business after a sort of hot housing period of 3 months to give them those skills.
Right. Okay. Look, thank you. Obviously, very clear. Both of you have lots of experience, and you both talked about or made reference to particular examples. That's where I'd like to start, if that's all right. Just if you can, starting with you, Janine, could you just give us some of the examples over your since 1991 in terms of transferring skills from different sectors?
Yeah, and I know today we're particularly talking about potentially, you know, post-COVID, what's this really done? And for me, what it's really done is accelerated a movement that we'd already started to see. I think particularly in the tech sector pre-COVID, organizations were having to, if you like, rip up the rule book and bend the rules around looking for people to join tech roles and digital roles that didn't necessarily have sector experience, but were able to bring the skills required to roles. And we started to see that a lot happening, particularly within the FS sector, where there was a dearth of skills, and actually this attitude around building up some of those skills and hiring for aptitude, if you like, was a great starting point. Now, post-COVID, my goodness, we've seen some great entrepreneurial efforts and some great creative thinking. In our own organisation, for example, In FS, of course, there has been a massive uptick in the number of inbound queries going into FS organisations as people and businesses struggle to manage their finances during this period. And across particularly the inbound call centre type environment, we've seen a 40% uptick in inbound queries coming in. Now, the types of individuals that can handle those queries, we've seen people being hired on a temporary basis from the hospitality industry, which of course was severely decimated at the beginning of COVID in particular, and a real broadening of where individuals have been hired from. We actually, on one of our investment banking clients, we actually pivoted 38 of our recruiters onto their COVID business help desk. So that was something that we wouldn't necessarily have historically done, but I think just some really creative thinking has lent to what does it require to do these jobs, and let's just be really open-minded about where we get these people from. So they're just a couple of examples. I could go on forever, but I'll let John speak.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, to Janine's point, this is something that's been high on my agenda for years. But, you know, going back about 6-7 years when I was at RS Components, we looked at our sales capability across the estate then. And this, you know, RS Components is a distribution business supplying into engineering businesses ultimately. Historically, we'd hired either engineers or people who'd worked in engineering businesses, and it wasn't a technical sell, right? So you didn't have to be an engineer to understand how to sell the thousands of products that we stocked. It was a kind of a more an account sell. We had a new sales director came in, you know, sales were not performing as well as they should. And we looked at, rather than look at industry experience or background, we looked at capability, right? And the core skills or behaviors, or skills and behaviors that were needed to do that job successfully. That ultimately meant the opportunity was greater because we could hire from, you know, hundreds of industries rather than 4 or 5, for example. And that transformed that sales function over time. Because you got more diversity in, it was more women, number one, because they didn't come from engineering backgrounds, and number two, you know, you had the pick of the crop rather than being very, very kind of narrow about your talent pool. You know, nationwide, as I said, you know, we've run a career change program called Technical Development Program for about 3 years now, purely to build out our tech skills, right? This was, it's, you know, commercially, it makes more sense to do that than rely on expensive consultancies. You know, the IBMs, the Deloittes charge you 4 times what it would be to train up a software engineer, right? And I think it is about a mindset, and it's about internally, it's about positioning the role of what your managers do, right? So are they there to manage, or are they technical skills people, right? And if what they're covering up for, if they're only after X experience, is a deficiency in management, not the opportunity to cross train or cross skill.
You mentioned mindset, and obviously we covered that in the presentation. How difficult is it to change that mindset? And you've got some great examples there, but I'm just interested to know what was the process.
Yeah, I mean, it is always difficult, right? I mean, it's always challenging because people like to hang on to what they know and what they've always done. You have to kind of present the story and the data around why and what the benefit, not necessarily what the benefits are, but how easy is it for them to adapt as well, and what they'll get out of it, and lead them step by step. It's not, you know, it's not a sell, it's a kind of collaboration, because to lean into those problems, there is often a root cause problem, e.g. I can't recruit, or it takes a long time, or you know, the market's going against me, or, you know, any and all of that. So you have to kind of sit the side of the table of that stakeholder. In sales, it was, you know, relatively easy, because you can say, I can demonstrate an uptick in sales, right? I mean, that would be a thing to do. But, you know, in other departments, it's doable, but you've got to sit in the same side of that as that stakeholder and say, what is the root cause of your problem here, your talent problem? And that could be, you know, that mindset change could be, as Janine has said, but, you know, we're doing it nationwide, is it could be an internal solution, right? You know, we often forget there's a big pool of talent in our own organisation, and it gets overlooked because they don't have 100% of the skills or job description that you're kind of hiring for. But actually what they do have is a deep organizational knowledge, and they, if they're a good performer, they share the values and the kind of purpose of what you're trying to achieve, which you can't, it takes a long time for an external hire to absorb that often.
Yeah. And I also think when you're trying to be, you could call it disruptive in that way. I mean, we've got a great example of where it didn't necessarily work as well as you'd hope, in that, and this is pre-COVID, 400 people in the tech space needing to be hired in 6 months. And we introduced some disruptive thinking, but from the very top down, what we did was engage the CIO to basically tell his hiring manager community, you will be attending assessment centres, virtual or in person, and you will not have seen the CVs of these individuals before you turn up. You're going to assess them based on what you see on the day or what you experience virtually. And as a recruitment team, the recruitment team had done all of the capabilities assessments beforehand. Now, a number of these people, I mean, what it was brilliant for was it lent itself brilliantly, as John mentioned, to the inclusion agenda, right? So it didn't discount anybody, and it included individuals that hadn't necessarily been in work for a period of time, but were absolutely had the skills to do the job. Highly successful, came out of the various assessment sessions with a really, really high offer rate. And then you come to the point whereby these people are being onboarded and they start to get into the working environment, and the difficulty comes in with the hiring manager community, who are then managing individuals who've come from a very different background and very different environment, and it requires a completely different set of management skills to hire those, to retain those individuals and help them flourish. And that's where we started to see higher levels of attrition than we'd expect. But it was on reflection and on assessment, it was more to do with the way that these people were being managed, and the way they weren't allowed to feel that they could flourish, rather than could they or couldn't they do the job. Yeah. So that's to John's point, really, about adapting internal behaviours as well. So a lot of it lends itself to the cultural shift and, if you like, backing and management of the hiring manager community.
Yeah. And it's also, sorry, John.
Yeah, I think the other thing, I mean, in addition to that, there is this, it's put a challenge out there. It's lazy thinking to assume, to just take an order from a manager, say they've got to have FS experience or engineering experience. If they're not, if they're an engineer, they've clearly got to have a skill. But you need to delve deep into, okay, what is it that will make this person successful? So when I was at Carillion, we were hiring graduates, and we'd always for various disciplines, quantity surveying, engineering, civils, etc. Now, obviously, in the engineering sector, they needed a degree in engineering. Fair enough, right? But we didn't have time to put them through a 5-year training for civil engineering. But quantity surveyors, when you actually dug deep with the managers of those areas, they were like, do you know what? Doesn't really matter what degree they've got. When you pushed them, it was like, because actually what we really need is someone that's prepared to go out on site and talk to people, and as long as they've got a brain, we'll put them through the exams. It takes 3 years, right? So actually our talent pool then was opened up hugely, because there was a massive, and probably still is, a massive kind of demand for quantity surveyors. That way we could grow our own and pick, geography, art graduates who were interested, right? But it's lazy thinking to just take an order from a hiring manager like that.
John, you touched on diversity earlier, and I'd just like to expand that a little bit with the two of you, if I may. So are we saying then that obviously with more skills transferring across different sectors, do you think that the future, what's the future of work going to be like? What's the future? Do you think that will have a really positive impact?
Right now there's a danger, because I think I saw an ONS stat yesterday that 9.8 million people are furloughed currently, right? And then this morning they said, was it a third of firms are going to lay people off in the next 3 to 6 months? Disproportionately affected at BAME communities. So there is a massive risk that the inclusion agenda is not acted upon. And again, it goes back to this question about what are the behaviours and skills that are transferable or relevant to the job that means you can include. So there's an opportunity and a threat to that agenda because the economics is not with us right now. Hopefully it'll get better. But again, it's back to this thing. It's a bit like it's old hat now, but when someone says I need 5 years of experience of X, Y, Z, you're then automatically excluding a woman who might have taken time out for maternity leave. So you've got to kind of get around this kind of thinking. So it's about, does experience trump a characteristic, and the experience, if I say it's 3 or 5 years, well, is it good experience, or is it just just been there for 5 years and not doing anything, right? So I think we have to be aware there are massive opportunities in that, if you like, your transfer market, but there are threats as well.
Yeah. And Janine, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think the blessing of the whole COVID situation is that I think when things return to normal, there will be a greater lens and opportunity for the diversity and inclusion agenda, in that I predict in the future, unless you're in a role that requires manual intervention, you will not be able to discount an individual based on whether they can go into the office or not. Now, that in itself broadens the talent pool really widely and is brilliant for the inclusion agenda around people with physical disabilities that may have problems commuting or anything, and also individuals who may feel some resistance to applying for a role because they may expect to have preconceptions of bias in the workplace, and it feels like a safer space to be able to work from home. So for me, the future of work, I think we all know, it's been proven across the majority of organisations that productivity hasn't depleted as a result of people being able to pivot and work from home really quickly. If anything, in a lot of cases, it's led to a greater level of engagement. If people haven't had to juggle homeschooling and everything else that goes with it, there's exceptional circumstances. But what I would say is I think the future of work, we know, will absolutely have to incorporate a large element of flexible working, and I think that is brilliant for the inclusion agenda.
I'd echo that, Will. We at Nationwide, our opportunity now, our head office is in Swindon. We're Swindon centric, so most of those head office jobs required you to be in Swindon, right? Historically, now our opportunity for our internal workforce as well as externally has just grown hugely, because as Janine said, we wouldn't require someone to be in 4 days a week in an office. It would be sometimes come up for a team meet or a collaboration session, but the majority will be flexible. So it gives us great opportunity. And for us, with an organisation with a social purpose, we've got almost a mission to serve the communities we have customers in. So from a social mobility perspective, again, gives us a big opportunity to look in areas where historically people wouldn't have either applied to us or thought about Nationwide.
And does this relate to your call centres, for example? So you don't necessarily have to people go into, they can be in a call centre at home.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. We flipped. I think in 12 weeks, we flipped from having 1,000 people on site in a building, call centres, to having, I think it's close to 800 working from home, and they aren't going back, right? Or they won't be asked to go back ever.
Yeah. Okay.
So any of those jobs, but I'm thinking more kind of graduate jobs or professional jobs where people just wouldn't have thought of Nationwide because of their location or whatever. Yeah.
And I suppose bringing it back to the transferable skills piece, that really lends itself, doesn't it, for other people in other areas. I want to work in a call centre, but I don't really want to physically be in a call centre every day. And that obviously means you can tap into other talent pools in different sectors. Really interesting. If I may, I just want to touch on. I spoke a little bit about the Chancellor's statement, and obviously one of the parts of his statement was supporting young people and looking at the Kickstart scheme. How do you think? I mean, it's great that he's introduced that, but how do you think that will impact, if you like, the changing or the changes in the hiring process of young people? Janine, can we start with you?
So I think it's great because it is It's coming from a social place, right? So in terms of making sure that we are looking after individuals entering the workplace for the first time, if you like, in terms of the wage subsidy, and also the focus around the subsidy around apprentices too. Right now, what we're seeing in the emerging talent space is individuals having to go through a virtual assessment process, and that's natural, but that is becoming increasingly sophisticated, and I could see that being the way of the future as becoming a norm. And what we're seeing naturally is the emergence of innovative technologies that really assist that virtual assessment center type activity. So in terms of hiring practices, I think where we've got individuals that are far more engaged technically already, we will see again it just broadening the talent pool and encouraging as many people as possible into the workplace. It will mean a greater focus on L&D and making sure that these people and the hiring manager community as well, going back to my earlier point, are really, really well equipped to know how to handle and manage these individuals effectively, so that the attrition rates just don't go through the roof. Yeah.
Great. And John, what's your?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen it already. I mean, we had to adapt our apprentice assessment process because it's a slap bang in the middle of the COVID crisis. And it, you know, with some engagement, extra engagement from us from a virtual session, because these are 16 to 19-year-olds, but it worked brilliantly, you know, and that we just put an extra bit of effort into those people that made it through our kind of initial sift to say this is what to look out for. So to Janine's point, that's here to stay, and I think it will be expected, right, by candidates, because it's easier, and actually the feedback we've had, bar some kind of tech issues, which was foreseeable because, you know, we weren't set up. I don't think anybody would have been, but managers loved it because they don't have to take out a whole day of their work. It's a couple of hours and they can get back to doing what they do, rather than, you know, moving offices or doing, you know, all the whole logistical nightmare. So I think that's here to stay. I think in terms of the scheme itself, you know, we're exploring it in a moment. The devil's always in the detail, but you know, as an initiative, it's a great idea. I mean, we'd support it. It's just, you know, I think when governments announce that sort of thing, they don't actually realise the work behind the scenes you have to put in to do it. You know, despite them saying, oh, they're paying the wages, but you know, there is a cost incumbent upon the employer to actually do this. So, you know, you have to think it through carefully, but we will be in some shape or form supporting it.
Yeah, good. So in terms of giving our audience some tips, both of you are very experienced. You've worked in lots of different organisations and different sectors. What would you say so John, if I could start with you, your kind of top 3 tips that you would give someone in terms of recruiting from different sectors and transferable skills?
I think number one is explore with your managers or your stakeholders what is really needed in the job or jobs that you're hiring, right? So what you know, so I need experience as a, you know, an X, but okay, what does that really mean? Okay, and why?
Yeah. I
think then it would be you know, have an assessment process then that measures that, rather than, you know, because experience is easy to measure because you can see it on a bit of paper and someone can tell you about experience. But if you're going down the track of I need to measure things you put on that slide or elements of that, you need an assessment process that will robustly give you an indication of, you know, the likelihood of that person doing well or not. And then I think, you know, keep those stories alive, you know, because often it's like a snowball, isn't it? I mean, you can't boil the ocean, but once one manager does something in an organization and it goes well, they tell someone else, and then everyone else piles in, goes up. You know, often people don't want to be the first people to dive into the pool. But when someone else is in there, they go, oh, that looks quite nice. So it's kind of keep stories alive, you know.
Yeah. On the assessment bit, John, just to sort of excuse my ignorance on this, but would you say that when you do an assessment, and if it's someone coming from another industry, would you have an element of leniency there? You know, and sort of say, well,
no, I don't think you do. I think by having an assessment process that is not based just on experience. It's based on some competency and some behaviours and some, you know, and you're measuring those ultimately behaviours and maybe thinking, critical thinking, if that's a, you know, thing for you, then you're more robust anyway. So I don't think you would show lenience. You're just saying, I'm assessing for
this is
X,
what I
Y,
want,
Z, and I'm going to measure it. And it, you know, whether you're from this industry or that industry, may or may not make a difference, right?
Yeah, good point. Janine, how about your 3 tips?
So my 3 tips. So the first one is quite a practical one. So I would remove any requirement for industry experience from job specs. So that's a pretty straightforward one. I think there'd be a requirement within organisations to broaden the attraction and EVP strategies, thinking about the broader target audience, you know, particularly around location strategy. And I'm going to drill in on one of Jon's points as well, and that is around working with the hiring manager community to really get them to think, particularly with internal candidates. And Jon mentioned this earlier, you know, stop looking for 100% match to the job spec. You know, maybe, and it's the role of the talent acquisition specialist to be really challenging the hiring manager community. You know, maybe look at a 50% match, but are they demonstrating all of the values and upholding the work ethic of the organisation and from an internal perspective, and what skills can be leveraged through utilising the L&D function within the organisation as well. So, yeah. Just flexibility around internal moves for sure. So they're my 3 tips.
Great. Well, thank you for those 3 tips. It's always good for our audience to have something to take away. So thank you very much. I made a pledge at the beginning of this that we would try and make some time back, and it's now 10, just gone 10 to. So first of all, if we can give a virtual round of applause to our panel. Well done. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. It's very busy.
All right.
I know that Janine and Jon, they've had to reschedule meetings and things because we overran. So really appreciate it. A really good discussion, so thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who joined. Sorry we've overran, but thank you. Hope you got something out of this. This is a part of a series, so we are going to be doing more webinars, so we will keep you informed and hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thanks all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.